I'm Christine Tully. I'm a senior writing coach with Defend and Publish, and this is episode 9, Do a Little Pleasure Reading. In the month of January, we've been focusing on ways to make your writing process more enjoyable. And for this final episode in February, we're going to focus on not doing writing in the way that we're thinking of these writing sessions at all. So let me explain what I mean by that. One of the things that scholars tend to do when they're putting off writing is to get involved in research. And so you'll spend hours looking in the scholarly databases, or you'll go on, kind of off on a trail and do some digging in the archives, or you'll run extra lab experiments or something like that, and anything to avoid writing. So one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do this month is actually to make your reading work for you and actually move your writing forward. So here's a couple ways that you can do that. I'll give you an example of how it works for me. One of the things that I do when I get my print journal, so I still subscribe to journals, I still get them in print. You may get yours in email, it works either way. But one of the things that I'll do is I'll get an issue in the mail and I'll take the plastic off of it. And during one of my writing sessions, usually once a month, but sometimes twice a month, I'll take the plastic off and I'll actually, for the time that I had devoted for writing, I won't do any writing on my project at all. Instead, what I'll do is I'll look at the latest issue, I'll read the articles, and I'll use a pen to take notes about how my project relates to one of those articles. Sometimes I can get my project to relate to all four because many of us are subscribing to journals that are in our subfield. So sometimes our current project is very relevant to what's going on in there. So here would be an example. One of the issues that I just recently looked at, I do a lot of work with faculty productivity and writing studies. And one of the articles in there was about the imposter syndrome and how junior scholars tend to think, their writing isn't good enough or strong enough. Well, that's something that relates to me. I don't really do work on imposter syndrome. So what I did with that article is I read it and then wrote notes in the margin about how it does relate to some of the things that I'm working on for time management. And one of the things that helps us do when we do that, and we actually use a pen, or if you're going to read something online, take notes in another document, or actually use note-taking tools on your document. So you can, of course, with PDF, you can highlight, you can make little notes on there or put stickies. But one of the great things about engaging with a reading text in that way is that, one, you're versed in the current scholarship and you actually know some of the things that are happening in your field. So one of the problems I think that happens when we work on writing projects too long is that we aren't well versed in other scholarship that's coming out. And so if we submit an article and we really haven't referenced anything that's happening currently, sometimes our scholarship can be out of date. So one way I avoid that problem is just making sure that I'm engaging with my latest journal issue once a month or something like that. One of the things that you can do too, if that does not work, because many of us are working in areas where maybe it's not a hot topic of scholarship right now. So for some of my friends in literature will often say that if they're working in a historical period, they'll say, well, not that many people are really interested in 16th century, whatever it is. And if that's the case, there's a couple things that you can do. One of the things I also like to do with reading, and this is again, engaging in some pleasure reading for the month, but another thing that I like to do, and again, I do devote a writing session to it because I am going to do some writing and engage with that piece. But one of the things that I will do is look up to see if I've been scooped, for a lack of a better word to think about it. So all of us kind of live with that fear that we're working on a project and then someone else is going to get it, get there first and publish it before we do. One of the ways to avoid that is to go look and see if you actually have been scooped. So I do try to do that once a month. And what I'll do is I'll go in the scholarly databases, I'll look up my subject area and just look at some new reading that's out there on the subject. This is useful in lots of different ways. One, it might give me some new pieces of information I didn't have about my project before from other fields. So my very, very tiny subfield would be maybe considered faculty productivity studies or faculty writing studies, but maybe somewhere in anthropology or in nursing or one of these other areas, maybe those scholars are focusing how to keep their faculty productive. And this actually did happen to me. That's why I'm using that as an example. I found a great article when I was just digging around on faculty productivity for how one program is helping nursing students be productive before they go and work in hospitals as teaching faculty. So that's an angle I would have never considered. I'm in the humanities, but totally worth my time to look at what they were doing. And it gave me some new ways to think about the information that I'm going to present. So that's one way that it can work for you. Another great thing about it is that it will, one, either reassure you and show you you have not been scooped, nobody did what you want to do, or you might find you actually have been scooped. And this has also happened to me, not with the current project I'm working on, but it has happened. And so, of course, the very first thing, you feel is a sense of panic that, oh no, somebody has done my project. I was too late. I didn't write fast enough, all that kind of stuff. But when I sort of took a moment, I went and read it. And one of the great things that I found in there is, yes, this other person and I were kind of doing similar work, but there were lots of nuances between what she was doing and what I was doing. In this particular case, she was working with brand new faculty. And on the current project, I was working with more established faculty with the project that related to. So that was one nuance. But I also found that like our methodologies were different. I found that we approached it differently. Our writing styles were totally different. We conveyed our information in different ways. And so what I ended up doing was using that article that I got scooped from, or that I felt I had been scooped on. And I actually used that as a way in my introduction in a new article to set up that, yes, a lot of people are talking about this issue. It's basically showing that lots of people are talking about it, even if some methods are similar, means there's a conversation. So it really establishes a rationale, like why anybody should be interested in this topic. And one of the reasons is that lots of scholars are talking about it. So there's definitely a way to do that. And I also think that does calm down some panic. So if you're a newer scholar working in the field, and you're just not used to, seeing people do the same kind of work that you do, it is a little bit reassuring when you actually get in there. And then again, of course, relating this back to your own writing project, see what you can do with that content. See if you're able to work that into your own scholarship somewhere. Sometimes it fits really nicely in the background. Sometimes it's another piece that's a rationale for a methodology. There's lots of ways that you can work it in. And for the record, I do get folks that will ask me about electronic articles and how I deal with those. I know a lot of people will make notes and store those in a place like Zotero. That's totally appropriate. And, if you're using Zotero already, you can certainly do it that way. I'm kind of old school in the way I deal with those articles. I do like to have them printed out, or of course, I told you about my print journals. And for me, that's just a practical fact that the print ones are very, very portable for me. So when I'm waiting for a child at practice, or when I'm waiting for a meeting to start, I can just have a highlighter, a couple pens, read a few paragraphs, take some notes. And that's another way too about squeezing in a very small writing session. So if you remember episode 8, I believe it was last week, where we talked about not calling it a writing session, this is another way you actually can do some writing on your project. So I've written plenty of articles in the margins of a journal on someone else's article, where I kind of like argued back with what they said. And I've really, developed my argument along that margin, or the marginalia. So that's another way that you might think about it. A third way that you can engage and see what else is happening in your reading community in a way you might use it would be to go and look and see if there's some sub-community happening in one of the public scholarship spaces. So certainly you can be looking at Inside Higher Ed, or you could look at the Chronicle of Higher Education, but I know for me, there is a group called the Scholarly Kitchen, and they do a lot with academic publishing. So they basically publish kind of like a daily, I don't know if we want to call it a blog, a newspaper, it's kind of a mix of the two. But for me, checking that out every day, I'm very aware of some of the new developments. And so sometimes I'll just spend a couple minutes scanning it at breakfast. If I see a great article, I'll hang on to that for later. And then in one of these sessions, once or twice a month, I'll actually pull that article and then take some notes on it. So that's definitely another place that you can look. A final place you might look, and this is really great for folks in the sciences. I definitely want to give a shout out to Prelights. I'm a big fan of Prelights. This is a preprints community for science. Preprints haven't caught on as much in the humanities. I've been on the lookout for them, and I know the MLA Humanities Commons, the Modern Language Association Humanities Commons, does have some of those. But in science, preprints are much more of a big thing. And one of the best ways to find out if, one, you've been scooped, but also to find out what else is happening on your topic or see some new emerging research is to go take a look at the preprints. And one of the reasons I like Prelights so much, just as a little shout out to them, is that they actually invite people to become pre-lighters, and you can read these preprints of scholarship and write on them and then develop your thoughts and your arguments on them. So I'll make sure that we have links in the show notes so you can check out what I mean by that. But just by the act of writing and engaging with someone else's scholarship, you're already thinking about your own position and you're re-articulating your own position. So that's another way that you might think about engaging in reading. So as a closing note on this, I would just say that if you're at a point where the semester is starting to fall on you, so many of us are getting there where bigger projects are coming due, we're almost up on midterms for people that are working in the academic community. If you're getting to a point where writing is starting to feel a little bit too much, I think it is absolutely okay to take a small step back. You can't do this in every single writing session, but let's say you have a writing session of 2 hours, one of the days, once a week, or maybe, an hour here or there, half an hour here or there, but no more than 2 to 3 hours. That's kind of the sweet spot for me with reading. I don't let it go on for like a 6-7 hour stretch. Many of us have dissertations to write. We have deadlines to meet. But I would encourage, if you have the time to take a little break and do a little bit of reading, or if you want to use that as sort of like your bonus, you've already written your 8 hours that I've recommended a couple episodes ago. If you've already written your 8 hours and you want to do just a little bit more on top, the reading really is a good way to kind of get yourself back in love with your subject matter. I mean, that's really what the focus of February was all about, was focusing on how to love your writing and how to, feel good about it. So this can be another way to get you involved. Have a great writing session or reading session. Thanks.